Hey, friends, welcome back to the Real Herbalist podcast, where we are demystifying herbalism and reminding you that your relationship with the plants and with the earth is your birthright, and it lives in your blood and your bones. Remember to come say hi over on Instagram at Erinn with two N's or on my YouTube channel at Homebody with Erinn. Today, we are talking to Veladya Chapman. I'm so excited. She's an herbalist, a nutritionist, a breathwork teacher, a mama, a homesteader. I started watching her YouTube channel about a year ago. I highly suggest checking it out, as well as her Instagram, both under the name Veladya Organica. You can buy her herbal creations, sign up for a breathwork class, or watch many of her YouTube videos and get inspired around health, herbs, homesteading, and much more. Thank you so much for being here, Veladya. I appreciate it. I know you are a busy mama. You are growing a human. You have lots going on. So I really appreciate your time.
Thank you, Erinn. I'm glad to be here. It's a privilege.
So I'd love to hear and just first start out with, how did you start working with the herbs?
That's a great question. Thank you. How did I first start working with the herbs? It's difficult because it's like, what defines working with the herbs? There's like kitchen medicine, and then there's, not going for the NyQuil and going for the mullein that someone gave me a year ago. And I'm like, what do I do with this? Um, I guess I will say I used to be an actress living in New York City, and I went to school for musical theater, and I was working on Broadway professionally, completely different version of who I am now. Not health centered at all, like, not taking care of my body at all. And I found veganism first because a castmate of mine in the show I was performing in was vegan, and she was so like vibrant and lively and was so into health and herbs and all the stuff that I just wasn't into and that I made fun of. And I just thought, well, I don't really feel so great. And she's always got this longevity, it seems, in rehearsals and in shows. So she helped me do like a vegan challenge with her. And now I am not anywhere near vegan and, honestly wouldn't even promote veganism, especially for like a childbearing body. But at the time, it did help me move into a space of health centered living, wellness centered living, because I was just like coffee and Doritos and like what McDonald's, it was just like whatever I could grab my hands on in New York City as I'm passing by something. But when you were vegan back then, before there were all the vegan creations that there are now and all the substitutes, it was like you really had to go back to earth foods and eat just earth foods. Like there was none of the stuff that there is 10 years later now. And so that was a complete mental switch in feeling my body expand in the inner knowing that like, oh, I can feel this good every day without a lot of trash in my body. So omitting all that trash, then realizing, okay, well, when I do get sick or when I do need support emotionally, energetically, physically, what do I lean on? Because I'm not really leaning on these things that I used to lean on as far as my food and other ways of support goes. So that sent me down a rabbit hole of nutrition online schooling. And in that nutrition online schooling, there was like a very basic understanding of herbs. And then maybe 6 months later, I no, maybe like 3 months later, I attended a 3-day all women's slumber party in Brooklyn. And it was like 8 women in this little apartment. I only knew one of them. And we just stayed together for 3 days being women. And that was the first time I tried yoni steaming. And that was the first time I really got my hands on like a bunch of herbs at a time that wasn't just in my kitchen. It was, we're going to do this practice that's ancestral for all of us, no matter what our lineages are. And this beautiful Black woman walked in with this bald head, and she's like in her 50s and she's so gorgeous, and was like, I'm going to share all this with you. And we sat in a circle and we steamed our yonis together, and my mind was just blown. And that cracked it open for me. Absolutely. So that was like 2015, maybe. Yeah, in Brooklyn, New York City. yoni steaming for the first time. And then from then on, I'm looking up all the little herbalist shops in the city and going to get my herbs and doing my own steams and switching them up for what I needed. And then just making medicines.
Wow, that's so cool. I had no idea that you had this whole other life. I just don't even know you as that person. So it's fun to hear about your transformation. And for those that are listening that may not know, can you share a little bit about what yoni steaming is and what it's good for?
Absolutely. So yoni is a Sanskrit word that means sacred space. So it can be many different things, but usually it's like modernly translated as the reproductive system, the female reproductive system, the yoni, the vulva, vagina, all of that, vaginal canal, uterus. So the yoni steaming practice is an indigenous practice too. Honestly, we have found evidence of it being all over the world. It's not just an Indian thing. It was not just an African thing. It was Nordic countries. It was everywhere for many different reasons. But mostly this practice was done for postpartum healing of the perineal area. So that's really from the yoni all the way back to the anus and the perineum and all of that that gets very affected in childbirth, as us mamas know. It could be any of that that's affected. Um, and sometimes for men as well, but most like 80% of the time for women. And it is a practice where you have hot water, boiled water with herbs. It can be sometimes done with just hot water, just to have the healing properties of the steam to the area, because that's going to increase circulation, but most of the time done with herbs in that local area, that are tonifying, that can increase circulation, that can increase lubrication, that are antibacterial to help with infections. But for postpartum, which was the largest way of use, the mother would squat over the bowl and or like maybe bend over it in a way that's most comfortable to her, so that the steam and the herbs that are in the steam, so the the medicinal properties in the herbs can rise up within the steam and enter the vaginal canal slightly, but mostly penetrate through the vulva, because as many of us know, that skin there is extremely permeable. It will like allow the medicine to go in. And yeah, it increases lubrication, circulation. And we know whenever we increase circulation to any part of the body, it's just medicine, just like blood flow going to that place is really a healing thing in itself. So yeah, and it's great for so many things. I mean, fibroid cysts, endometriosis, PCOS, irregular cycles, painful cramps, infections like yeast infections, BV. Um, I've had I've helped friends with so many different things, with all different types of herbs, yoni steaming. Yeah.
I'm so glad that you brought that up because I don't think I've talked about yoni steaming at all on the podcast or on my YouTube channel yet. So I'm so glad that you brought that in. So if people are interested in getting like yoni steaming blends, that's something that you do on your website as well, right?
Yes, totally.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome. And we'll have Veladya's information in the show notes or the description box for this video or podcast as well. So go check those out if you're interested in doing some yoni steaming. I did do some myself postpartum, and I have a little bit of experience doing some in a group setting as well. And it is a really beautiful practice. So thank you.
Right? It's like we have these practices and then we forget about them. I have so many like castor oil packs. I'm like, oh, I forgot. And then my midwife was like, hey, you can do this. Or my friend who's like attending as a midwife for my next birth. Yeah, yoni steaming is one I forget about often. And then I remember and I'm like, oh, this is amazing.
Yeah, I think for me, the challenge sometimes is just slowing down just to be present for the doing of it. Like I have so many things in my toolbox that I know that I can do. And I can get caught up in the learning and stuff because I really love to learn. But it's all about just taking like 15 minutes or 10 minutes or even 5 minutes and just putting what we're learning into practice and trying it out. And I think that can be kind of a barrier for people who are new to herbalism too, like thinking that they have to know everything before they get started. But it really is just, taking what you're learning and trying it out and figuring out what you like and what works for you and learning the different herbs and all that. So remember, if you're listening and you're someone who can get caught up in the learning or thinking that you have to know everything, just get started and try it. Because many of the people that are listening to the podcast are new to herbalism and just getting started, what would your advice be to someone who wants to play around with the herbs, but maybe feels a little bit intimidated or overwhelmed to get started? What would you say to them?
Mm, great question. My advice to variations of that question is always to start with the kitchen, because the kitchen can be less intimidating than, the medicine making room or whatever other place medicines are made. We all feel a certain level of comfort in the kitchen just naturally, because we all have a presence in the kitchen since we were children with our caregivers and up into teenage and adulthood, preparing whatever you prepare for yourself. And you have seasoned something, you have made a tea really quick, even if it was dropping a bag and you didn't even know what it was. You have touched herbs in some way in the kitchen, most likely from cooking anything that wasn't just like a microwavable item. So that can be a place where you start, and it can be less intimidating. You can make an incredibly medicinal meal without it having to be something scary. You're making a roast or a chicken breast, or even if you want to season it when it's already been cooked, you can add rosemary, you can add parsley, you can add anything. And these foods naturally are antibacterial, they're anti-inflammatory, they're giving you, like when you're cooking a soup, put a little bit of turmeric, or like curry powder already has turmeric in it. You don't even have to get turmeric by itself. You know, um, Look at what's already in your cabinet, and then do a little quick Google search and see like, what are these herbs and what are their properties? Oh my God, I already had this in my kitchen the whole time. And I've been adding this to my meats or my potatoes or whatever. And then that can be a really simple, non-intimidating way that you've probably already been doing. And then from there, you'll start to get to know the herbs and get to know the flavors. And if you already have maybe a mixture of like chicken seasoning, how about next time we get the rosemary on its own, we get the parsley on its own, we get this on its own, and see what does that taste like by itself instead of in this mixture? What would it be like to have this in a different way? And then you can look up recipes, and yeah, it can expand from there, but we all have a very basic understanding of like kitchen medicine. Yeah, and teas are really nice too, because teas are not so intimidating. Most of us have had tea in some way. If you don't like hot tea, you can then refrigerate it, add sugar to it, and make it like something super inviting that you might be more used to, and get your medicine in that way.
Yes, I love it. Thank you. Uh, what would you say is a great medicine type for beginner herbalists to start out with? I know we talked about yoni steaming, talked about kitchen medicine. What else would you say is like an easy place for people to start?
Tincturing is really, really simple. It can seem intimidating, but it's actually really not. And it was one of the first ways I felt like I'm actually a herbalist now, because I'm not just making tea anymore. I'm going to make something that's stronger and it's got like a more concentrated concoction of the plant. So let's say, you can use Google, or you can get an herbal book and you look up something that you want for your home or your family. It can be something for allergies. Right now, goldenrod is all over the place in my local area. It's a big, yellow, gorgeous plant that's wonderful for allergies, especially wet allergies, all of the mucus and stuff that comes up with the changing of the seasons. So you can look up an herb. I mean, there are so many different ways. Maybe it's more intimidating to do the plant identification outside where you take a picture of it. But if you know exactly what an herb is and you source that herb, you get it online from any herbal provider or whatever. You get your dried herb. To tincture it, you just get 100 proof alcohol. That is in any of your local liquor stores. It doesn't have to be anything you get online or in a fancy herbal shop. It can be anything that's 80 and up will make a tincture. I like to use 100 proof because it's really going to pull those plant constituents out. In a jar, you put your dried herb. There's all different folk methods of how much you put. I really just like use my heart's calling. I don't measure. But you want to at least do a third of the jar. And then the rest of it, you pour that vodka in there. You can use brandy. You can use Gin, you can use other ones. Vodka is like gives it more of a cleaner flavor if you want to do other stuff to it. But I've used all different types of alcohols as long as it's 100 proof. Pour it in there, close it, leave it for 4 weeks, maybe 6 weeks, maybe even 8 weeks. 4 weeks is the minimum. And you made a tincture, and that's it. Dried herb, 100 proof alcohol, vodka most likely. Close it up, seal it up, leave it out of the sun maybe. That's going to be better for it, for the medicine to really do what it's going to do, and it's not going to like mess with it with oxygen and sunlight oxidizing it and things like that. But don't worry about all that. Just put it in a dark cabinet, shake it every couple days, and then minimum 4 weeks, you strain it. You can put it in little fancy bottles if you want, gift it to your friends and family, or you can leave it in the big jar if you want. It's going to last for years in that jar. And now you've pulled out the really beneficial parts of that plant in a very concentrated way because the alcohol pulls it so strongly. And there you go. You can do that for tons of herbs. You can use fresh herbs. If you've got a plant, a rosemary plant, lemon balm plant, mint plant, anything, you can mix it up and make your own with fresh, or you can use dried that you order online or get from an herbal shop. It's like no fuss, super simple.
I love what you brought up too around just like following your heart's calling. And I think that's a really beautiful thing to just remind everybody, because it's easy to get caught up in the thinking that you have to do it the right way, or there's like a certain, rigid way to do things. That's the perfect way to say it, that rigidity. But there's also, folk herbalism is not about measuring. It is about intuitive, um, playing with the plants. And I think that this practice can be something that we can just feel into our bodies, feel into our heart's calling, feel into our intuition, and just play around with the herbs and have fun. And, it doesn't have to be, it's not an exact science. And if you are someone who maybe gets caught up in spending all this time trying to find the right way to do it, then you're going to be spending a lot of time doing that, because this can be something that you can do that. You can find, someone with giving you a specific recipe with specific measurements, but you can also just play around and have fun and have a general idea of how to make something and experiment. And so I just want to throw that out there too, for those of you that maybe are in a lot of rigidity in your normal life. This can be a place where that you can just be in your body with this and play.
Totally. And it's like cooking, they say cooking is alchemy. And when you're cooking and you're angry and it's like really rigid, you can taste it in the food. Like, your great granny wasn't doing all that measuring. She was cooking with so much love. She was so happy all the family was around. And it makes the food taste 10 times better because we're working with earth materials here. When we're cooking, we're working with vegetables, fruits, animal meat, whatever. And when we're working with herbs, we're working with what the earth has given us. It's all energetic. So remember that that's all alchemy. You don't have to get so rigid about it. That's what folk herbalism is. And you're out there looking up all different types of herbalism, you'll see folk herbalism probably. And that means they're probably not making everything so perfect. It's all so different. You've got folk herbalists. When you get a group of 10 in a room, I promise you, they're all going to have their own different ways that they make the exact same medicine that is not by the book, because it's from the heart. It's for healing. It's in tune with Mother Earth. Nothing that Mother Earth does is perfect. It's also from the heart, loving frequency. So as long as you've got that in there and you're not, working with like poisonous plants or anything like that, the rules can be really loose, in my opinion.
Yeah. And for me, that's just so much more fun. I'm curious, what are 3 herbs that you think every woman should know about?
Ooh, spicy one. Okay. Keeping it simple first would be ginger, because ginger is an amazing ally for our bleeding time. It's fantastic for before we start bleeding to kind of get the circulation going all over the body and get the organs supported during this like sensitive time. Wonderful for during bleeding, for cramping support, for digestive support. Some of us get that digestion gets really wacky during bleeding time. And then post bleeding to also keep the body warm. We want to keep our bodies warm. during that really sensitive time. And I wanted to start with that one because it's simple. Like we can find it almost everywhere. You can probably find tea bags in whatever grocery store you frequent. So you don't have to overthink it and can bring that medicine into your home. And it can just serve you in so many ways. But for women specifically, it's a great bleeding ally. And most of us, that are during your bleeding time, it's fantastic. Um, Second would be one of my number one allies, and that's Paw d'Arco. Now that's harder to find in a grocery store. You're going to have to find it online, but it is very available online, with Mountain Rose Herbs, Frontier, Star West Botanicals. Those are my top three, and you'll be able to find it there. It's a bark of a tree, and it's so amazing for any and all imbalances. And I feel like we all need to have that in the back of our cabinet somewhere in case we get the occasional yeast infection, in case we get the occasional UTI, in case we have any sort of imbalances that happen to us all or have happened to you at least once in your female life. And it's not as fun to go to the store and get like the monostat or like whatever weird stuff they have there that's just like not so great. But it is a strong antibacterial, a strong antifungal bark, and it wipes out infections. It wipes out UTIs. It wipes out any fungal imbalances that the female body is just more susceptible to because we have that beautiful little fungal universe down there that can sometimes get thrown off by the slightest things in your bleeding time, in pregnancy also, and in menopausal times. The pH and the universe of the vulva changes so much in those 3 times. Like in your young times when maybe you're not taking so much care of yourself and your fungal levels are changing so much when you're young. I mean, like, teenage years, and then periods change it, and then pregnancy definitely changes it. And Paw d'Arco is totally safe during pregnancy. I know I was getting infections with my first pregnancy, and it's so frustrating. And then in menopause also, the pH and everything around the vulva and the vagina changes a lot. So it can be a great ally, Paw d'Arco, during that time. And then my third herb for women out there, I'm going to say Oatstraw, because Oatstraw is so wonderful at soothing or rebuilding really a depleted nervous system. And, we're just carrying the world on our backs here as if birthing the humans of the world isn't enough. There is so much on the backs of women. And a lot of our nervous systems are just really taxed in the modern day world. We already have all the environmental pollutions and toxins and interferences, EMFs, and just so many things that our bodies, no matter what gender you are, you're working through. But then a female body is also bleeding every month, or we're also childbearing, or we're also just living in the 28-day cycle, period. And our modern day world is not set up to benefit the 28-day cycle. I mean, we're working, we have so much going on, and not a lot is like, oh, you're in your luteal phase, you're in this phase, So serving our nervous systems is very important to me. And when our nervous systems are depleted, it can show up as so many other things: depression, anxiety, and ADHD and ADD, and things that we might be running to the doctors for. No shade on Western medicine. It definitely serves us sometimes, but sometimes it's just your nervous system crying out for like deep, deep help. And one little quick meditation isn't going to do it. So Oatstraw is really nice as a daily emotional support for anxiety and for just rebuilding the nervous system.
Oh, I love Oatstraw. Thank you so much for that. And the side note here, I just want to say, like, I love talking to other people who play with the herbs because there's just so much to know. Like, for example, an herb like ginger, like I'm very familiar with ginger. I use it a lot, but hearing about how you're talking about it, I'm like, oh, I never thought about it like that. There's just so much to learn, and everybody that I talk to knows different things. And I think that's something that's so beautiful about herbalism, is that there's just so much to learn. We can all learn from each other. And I feel like everybody I talk to just knows different things. And so it's just so fun to continue to expand our knowledge of these herbs that we maybe feel like we already know. And I also wanted to ask you about the Pau d'Arco. So I'm familiar with it in the context of candida cleansing. But I wanted to ask you, like, for the methods that you mentioned, what way would you use it? Would you use it in like a tea, or would you yoni steam with it? How would you go about using it for the things that you mentioned?
Totally. My number one way to use it is in a tincture because we want to hit it internally, and a tincture is just going to be a really strong concentration of it. So the way I described earlier with the vodka or 100 proof alcohol, get the bark, soak it for a minimum of 4 weeks, and use that as your stash. Steaming, absolutely. Like if I had something, the tincture works fine for me for a yeast infection. But if I had something maybe more severe like bacterial vaginosis, where the fungal imbalance is a lot greater and it might take longer, absolutely hit it from both directions. Take the tincture and steam with it and let, those medicines go in both ways. But usually the fungal imbalance is like gut. It's like starting in the gut and then moving down to the vagina and the vulva. So my favorite way is a tincture. It's not the tastiest tea out there, so I don't really ever make it as a tea. But if I had the bark and I didn't have a tincture mate and I needed to use it now, absolutely would tea it and then just grin and bear it like many of us do in the herbal world.
Yeah.
But it can
Okay.
be kind of bitter, yeah. I also wanted to mention it's fantastic for herpes and herpes outbreaks for people who I have a few clients I've helped with, and they keep the pot of Arco just like in as a stash, and they use it monthly when they think they're going to get an outbreak, and they don't get the outbreaks. It's amazing. So that's something worth mentioning too, because there's not a lot out there for people who have herpes. Yeah.
And I would love to ask you too about motherwort, because I feel like that's a really emerging herb, or at least it's emerging in my world. It's probably very much already out there for so many people, but because I'm a new mother, I think I've just recently heard so much about it and been given it through my postpartum time. So I'd love it if you could speak to motherwort too, if you feel that you can.
Totally. It's one of my favorites. I grow it here on my land. I have a ton of it. She will take over if you give her the chance to root down in a garden. Um, so it's called motherwort for a lot of different reasons, but I believe because it is an amazing emotional support plant. And people say it's like a big hug from your mother. It's like a bear hug. If Oatstraw was like a rub your back, Motherwort is like, I'm holding you. It's for the deeper emotional needs. Um, I like on my shop, I have Oatstraw and Motherwort. Oatstraw I recommend for like your daily little anxiety, or like maybe your just your daily moments that are like, I know that I'm going to need this every day. But Motherwort is like, I have a panic attack right now and I need immediate support. Or having navigating a deep emotional realms in a psychedelic experience because I'm an entheogen facilitator, and I facilitate psilocybin. And Motherwort is actually really great in my ceremonies when someone is navigating those deep, dark realms that often happen in psilocybin, and they need just like a little bit of like a hammock to help them move through it without completely losing their cool. Motherwort's amazing for that. But also it's an amazing herb for mothers because it's an antispasmodic. So it's great for those afterbirth pains. Antispasmodic meaning the spasms of our bodies when our children are born. Immediately after, your uterus starts to move and contract so that it can return to its original size. And some of us experience pain through that, after we birth our children. And motherwort can be so great at soothing that pain. And also, because it's antispasmodic, it's great for cramps as well, even if you're not having children. It's fantastic for any sort of spasmodic pains in the body, but especially within the uterus, especially within the reproductive system. Um, and then on top of that, just the mildly sedative qualities it has is what I meant for like panic attacks or deeply heightened emotional responses. People who are like hypertensive, they're used to their blood pressures getting high and have a more sensitive reaction to life's experiences. Motherwort is like that one that comes in like superhero. vibes. And postpartum, it's amazing because we've had this rush of oxytocin, we've had all these amazing endorphins and hormones hit us, you know, in third try and as the child is born, and then things are needing to even out and figure themselves out once baby is born, and you still have so much life around you. You have a partner, you may have work or whatever. And as I said, life isn't built around our 28-day cycle or our female experience. So we can sometimes feel like we're falling into the darkness as fresh new mamas. And Motherwort is absolutely a hammock right there, just as a soothing presence for rough emotional turbulence. Yeah. And great
Mm.
for sleep. So many
Mm.
things.
Oh, that sounds amazing. I have some, and I think I'm going to go take it after we get off our call. I love that you brought that up, and I feel like I could use a hug from the mama. So I also love if you could speak to herbs and pregnancy. So, for example, if you're pregnant and you're Googling certain herbs, you're not necessarily going to get the green light on a lot of different herbs. And so I'm wondering if you could speak to how you navigate that. I think that could be really helpful for a lot of women.
Totally. Yeah, I get it all the time. I post about herbs online that I'm taking in pregnancy. Even something as like simple and gentle to my mind as nettle. And they're like, we're not supposed to be having herbs. I get a lot of responses. I Googled it and you can't. So the world of herbalism and pregnancy for me is the first step. If you're not already there in your pregnancy or in your health journey at all, of sovereignty. It's the first step of stepping away from the Western medical system, of stepping away from a lot of the guidance, like generic guidance that we're given, and tuning in to ancestral knowledge and tuning in to what happened before hospitals and doctors became the norm. Because your ancestors were absolutely taking all different types of herbs in their pregnancies and postpartum and all different types of times in life, and we're not supposed to be taking herbs. So if you have an herb and you Googled it and Google said no, which is like 99% of the herbs, and you're pregnant, my first advice would be to look up an herbal monograph of that herb, which are always available on Google. Some website somewhere is going to have what's called a monograph of that herb, and that's going to be the scientific or biological understandings of the herb. For example, I was talking about Motherwort and I said it's an antispasmodic, it's a mild sedative, things like that. It'll tell you what these things are. So like if you see black cohosh is an emmenagogue, meaning it is going to encourage the uterus to contract or to bleed. You can look up what the word means and look up, oh, this is probably not ideal for my pregnancy time. Forget what the Google big recommendation is. You did that work, and to understand what the biological workings of that plant is, you can make the sovereign decision if that's something that you need right now. You're going to look up nettle. Google says don't use nettle. So ridiculous, because then you'll see there's nothing dangerous about nettle. It's tons of minerals, tons of vitamins, energetic. It's got this, and that. Nothing would be a contraindication for my body growing a baby. Also, it takes a lot of trust because your body knows exactly what it's doing. There are women who have children that are addicts. There are women who have children in war zones under a lot of stress. There are women who have children with so much stress, physical, chemically, whatever, and their babies come out fine. I'm not saying, go smoke cigarettes and drink alcohol. I'm saying the placenta, the first mother, filters. Our livers filter, then the placenta filters and gives the baby exactly what it needs. So having an herb like nettle that Google told me not to have, and then I read it and see there's nothing in here that says my body's going to release a baby from this. I know my body's intelligent enough to know what to give the baby from there, And then another aspect is ancestrally. Look up maybe the historical uses of this herb, especially the ones that are like women's herbs, red raspberry leaf, nettle, alfalfa, that a lot of women use in pregnancy on the internet, but you are feeling worried about it because Google said no. Okay, when did these practices start? You might find that your great grandmother and that whole area of wherever your blood is from was absolutely using these herbs to support pregnancy. And generations were born totally fine. And yeah, that's pretty much what, you might not find Google saying, yes, take it, because it's the medical system protecting themselves, but you can put on your sovereign hat and make the decision for yourself and tune in and see how your body feels and see how your baby responds, and it's okay. Honestly, there are very, 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 very little herbs that are going to interrupt a pregnancy. Honestly, a very small amount. And those are usually your emmenagogal herbs. Black cohosh, blue cohosh, lobelia, which is like a cervical opening one. Any of the herbs that are like used for herbal abortions. Those are like the only ones I steer clear. Everything else, it's really nothing to worry about. Your body's so strong and smart.
I love the conversation around body sovereignty and body trust. That's like a whole other conversation and a whole other podcast that we could have. So I'd love to share my experience around this. When I was pregnant last year, I was doing some Googling, just curious what was on the internet around certain herbs and pregnancy. And I think I Googled, is chamomile safe during pregnancy? Because that's one of my favorites. And it said no. And I just felt like that just didn't resonate with me. Like, that didn't make sense to me. And I'm a part of this community online called the Free Birth Society. I know that you're familiar with them as well. And I saw a class come up called Herbalism during pregnancy. And so I attended this class, and the woman who was leading it, I forget her name, but she was sharing that there definitely are certain herbs that women take to release a pregnancy. But even those herbs, in order to release a pregnancy, you have to take a high dosage of the herb for like weeks in order for that to happen. And so these herbs like peppermint, chamomile, basic herbs are not going to, release a pregnancy just from having like a cup of peppermint tea, for example. And so that really made me feel at peace with what I already knew felt right in my own body. So I just wanted to share that in the hopes that it could be helpful for people and sort of put herbalism and pregnancy into a little bit bigger of a context, which that comment really helped me do.
Totally. Absolutely true.
I feel like we covered all the things that I wanted to cover and more, but I'd love to just check in with you and see if there's anything else that feels like it wants to be said before we complete.
Yeah, I guess I just wanted to remind everyone that we can all call ourselves herbalists. I presenting myself as an herbalist online often get many, many questions of where am I certified from, so that they can also go to that program, or what books did I use, or, who taught me, where, why. And all of that's grand because the knowledge does have to come from somewhere. And unfortunately, I don't have a wide resource of elders that are available to me from my lineage that can teach me some of the teachings. And we don't need a fancy certificate to call yourself an herbalist, because I guarantee you, no matter what your skin color is, what your gender is, what you look like, your lineage, your great great grandmother knew how to go outside and pick something from the ground or pick something off of a tree and make something to heal the people in her home or the people in her area. So you can access that through some of the things we talked about today, through the internet. I mean, we are alive in such an amazing time because it's all there, just like degrees and degrees and degrees worth of information is free online everywhere, and in books, in your libraries everywhere, and in just discovering a plant, walking around your front yard and seeing what Mother Earth has already provided to you, taking a picture, asking people, realizing, oh my God, I've been having these crazy allergies. I needed this. It was right here the whole time. Mother Earth will always provide. So I like to always tell people that it's like really for all of us. And you absolutely can create and forge a relationship with the plants and confidently call yourself an herbalist and a medicine maker just by doing it and by learning by doing and not needing anything fancy. Because I'm not certified. I've been doing it for a decade now. And I have no fancy piece of paper that someone said, I'm now allowed to do this because my great grandmother did it. And she was healing people all left and right. She was helping people have babies in their houses. And she didn't have a midwife certification. She just had 12 children and knew how to help them. So, it's just another ancestral, like sitting back in our inner knowing that we already have, like you were saying, that inner knowing about chamomile. We all have the inner knowing. And then we look outward, outward, outward for the answers when we already knew deep down. So if you're wanting to be an herbalist, you can call yourself that, start making the medicine, mess up some batches, make some new ones, and you're an herbalist. Congratulations.
That's so perfect, actually, because the name of this podcast was created because I talk to all types of people like yourself who create and sell herbal products, or people who just make tea for themselves or oil for themselves at home in their kitchen. We're all real herbalists. And so that's actually the perfect way to just wrap this up. Thank you so much for adding that. I'd love for you to share where people can find you, work with you, get your creations, etc.
Wonderful. I'd love to. So again, my name is Veladya, and you can find me all over the internet as Veladya Organica. It's V as in Victor, Eladya, Organica, on YouTube, where I share a lot of free education around homesteading, herbalism, nutrition, women's health, and just like storytelling of my family life. And then Instagram and Facebook. Awesome. And my website is veladyaorganica.com. And you can get some of the things we talked about today, like the Oatstraw, the Motherwort, the yoni steaming, and some other medicines I make with plants that I grow here on my land and other places.
And you do a weekly breathwork class, right?
And I do a weekly breathwork class for now until I go into baby birthing mode. So it'll go on for the rest of the year and then probably end for the beginning of 2024. Yeah, every Sunday. And you can sign up on my website.
Thank you so much for being here, Veladya. I know you're a busy mama and you're growing a human and you have a whole beautiful, full life. So thank you for saying yes to being here and sharing your wisdom with us.
Thank you, Erinn. It was a pleasure.
Thank you so much for listening to today's podcast episode with Veladya Organica. You should definitely go check out her YouTube channel, her website with all her herbal offerings, her breathwork class, and her Instagram. I highly recommend it. And I hope this episode was inspiring for you and reminding you that herbalism can be easy and fun, and it is actually something that you're probably already doing. And remember to come over and say hi on my Instagram. I'd love to hear from you. What other questions do you have? What other content would you like to see from me? If you're listening to this podcast on the podcast, come over to my YouTube channel, Homebody with Erinn. I'll link all the goodies in the show notes. Thank you so much for listening and look forward to connecting with you on the next episode.